Hello, my name is Osha. I am continuing with my discussion on the um, the Florida judge who signaled the uh, dangers of defendants being on antipsychotic medication. Of course, I talked about how the Florida judge, Lisa Allen in of Hillsborough County, uh, in Tampa, Florida, had been reassigned to the civil division by Chief Judge Christopher Sabella after she had cautioned her defendants in her court, and these were misdemeanor cases about the use of antidepressants, antipsychotics. She pointed out the effects, the side effects, and she said it impaired the brain. And of course, after she did that, the Criminal Defense Attorneys Association in Hillsborough County, they circulated notices, sort of reprimanding her for that and stating that that she was stigmatizing medication that actually helped and were life saving. Um, Again, I pointed out what is really stigmatizing. It is stigmatizing when the criminal justice system colludes with pharmaceuticals and psychiatrists to violate the zone of privacy rights of defendants who are still innocent until proven guilty, and to now coerce them to take medication they do not want, which they do not they do not need. Right? They just provide forced nostrums down the throats, and it's particularly marginal members of marginalized communities that are subjected to these abuses. I know because the state of Maryland, Montgomery County, tried to coerce me. They violated my rights for 3 years, tried to coerce me to take nostrums for an illness I've never suffered. They themselves have admitted that I don't have any mental illness, right? And one of the things that, amongst the criticisms raised by the uh, the criminal defense attorneys and others who invade against Judge Lisa Allen's humanitarian intervention, right, in her courts, was that she should be charged or something with for practicing medicine without a license. That she's a judge, she graduated from law school, and she's trying to practice medicine without a law degree. Well, this is what every judge, right? Every judge in Maryland who orders, who arbitrarily uh, tries to impose mental illness by judicial fiat and prefers a nostrum. Judge James Bonifant did it. He did this in his courtroom, tried to do it with me. Judge, I've never told anybody I have bipolar disorder. I don't have bipolar disorder. Their own psychiatrists have now admitted that I don't have bipolar disorder, and they told him. This judge arbitrarily started telling me that I have bipolar disorder and I should go and take medication. Why don't I want to take medication? And telling me he had experience. And I started wondering, does he suffer from bipolar disorder and he knows this? Because he wouldn't let me respond and ask him questions, right? Violating my constitutional rights, and right of natural justice. I like to say the Latin, violating audi alteram partem, right? That's my right to be heard. But he's talking at me, acting like he's a psychiatrist. At some point, I started wondering, does this man have megalomania because he thinks he's a psychiatrist? He doesn't know me. I haven't told him that I'm hallucinating. I haven't told him that I'm depressed. I haven't told him that I have any of these symptoms that a bipolar person has. Why does he say I have bipolar disorder and I should go and take medication, right? Because it started from him asking me to go and do an evaluation voluntarily. And I said, no, I'm not going to do any evaluation because I'm not ill. Somebody who goes to see a psychiatrist to do an evaluation, it's because they have some kind of symptom that's bothering them. I'm not ill. I'm not experiencing anything. They've charged me with false, arbitrarily with a crime, right? And to use it as a pretext to coerce me to now go and take their nostrums, right? So you see the abuses, the criminal justice system, they have crooked judges like Judge James Bonifant, a crooked cops, right? How is it a cop falsifies a charge statement and then lies saying I have an undiagnosed thought disorder when he's not a psychiatrist? You have cops who are practicing psychiatry without a license. And practicing medicine without a license. This was a cop. I don't know if he graduated from high school because apparently in some counties the minimum requirement to be able to be employed as a cop is to be in the process of taking GED. Right. I don't know if Demarcus Coleman, who wrote like he was intellectually challenged. You should have seen all the apart from the canards, the my goodness, the terrible writing English, and I bet all the only language he can probably speak is English, but he can not write well in that one language, right? And this dude is was thinking he was a psychiatrist, saying, "Oh, that I have an undiagnosed thought disorder." Somebody he didn't know. He didn't know anything about me. He didn't know if I'd taken drugs, because use of marijuana is actually legal in the state of Maryland. You can use it in your home. And it was in my home they came to get me. How did they know that I hadn't used marijuana in my home? I didn't use my, by the way, just to as a disclaimer, I did not use any, full disclosure, I didn't use any marijuana. I've never used marijuana. I didn't use any drugs. But with regard to the charge statement that was making these outlandish pronouncements without knowing me, right? So the criminal defense lawyers in Florida, right, in Hillsborough, accused, they're now accusing Judge Allen of, practicing medicine without a license. I mean, those were the comments that were coming up in the article, that she was practicing medicine without a license. That's what they routinely do in Maryland, right? Demarcus Coleman, the police officer who wrote that I had an undiagnosed thought disorder, that was what he was doing, practicing medicine without a license. In fact, the first person who found me competent to stand trial, Dr. Martin Brandis of Eastern Shore, he stated it. He asked me, "Is this person a psychiatrist?" The person who wrote this, and he said, "This is improper. It's inappropriate for him to someone, he's not a psychiatrist. Why is he doing the work of a psychiatrist, saying I have an undiagnosed thought disorder? If you want to charge me with a crime, I'm in my home. He had no probable cause. If he's charging me with a crime, why is he acting like he's a psychiatrist?" It shows the fraud they orchestrated. They engineered a fraud. Apparently, there was an emergency evaluation petition that they had gone to perjure and fabricate, that Jide Wari manufactured, complete work of fiction that I was not aware of. My family was not aware of. My aunt's a psychiatrist. For a long time, I couldn't believe this guy did it alone, because I had to ask my aunt that, did you help this guy obtain this? Did he consult you? My aunt said no, she wasn't unaware. She didn't even know what was going on. She didn't know where I was. At some point, she even asked him, where was I? This guy fabricated stuff with the help of police. He told me he volunteers for the police. So that's how they did it together. They colluded together, right? I don't know how they did it, but the FBI has failed to investigate. The Department of Justice has failed to investigate. I'm an American citizen. I'm not just an American citizen. I was a federal government employee until that day. And I still am. I'm just sort of like in limbo, because I have a property interest in my federal government job, right? I have due process of law. I was assaulted as a federal government official in my home, and then they made false accusations against me. This guy, Jide Wari, defamed me, lied, violated my rights in order to obstruct justice, because I know that was what he was trying to do. He was trying to impede the complaints I had, federal complaints regarding fraud, waste and abuse, mismanagement, and and discrimination that I filed against some senior leaders and senior executives, and that's my constitutional right to petition, right? For redress of grievances, and I'm doing it to protect the American taxpayers. That we shouldn't have fraudsters in the Department of Defense or the Department of Navy, that they're using their position for self-aggrandizement, like Kirsten Risbeck, like Jamie A. Simon, like Nathan R. Brown, like Nefertaria Brown, Nefertaria McBride, right? And I reported them. And the job is, it goes before a judge, it goes before a court. They make that determination and we provide evidence, we do discovery. Instead, they obstructed justice. They have their agents who work in the police department, and then they suborned Jide Wariri. Jide Wariri, the man jealous that, okay, how is it that this man has been blessed? He came to America, no family support, no father, because he knows he never gave me support, right? Not him, not his children, nobody, right? And they're seeing my star soar. And in any event, I'll leave that aside. Let me focus on what I was going to talk about. Judge Lisa Allen, who had, and her praiseworthy humanitarian intervention, because they're using the pharmaceuticals shamelessly and corruptly in cahoots with the always racist criminal justice system in the South to destroy the lives of defendants, right? Especially people from marginalized communities. Because I saw what was going on in these psychiatric hospitals. I was fortunate I came out, right? I was fortunate. But I saw others who were not as fortunate. And again, when I was wrongfully detained in Montgomery County, Maryland, between 2024 and 2025, 4 people, within in the space of 2 months, 1 month, just a few weeks, 4 people died, 3 by apparent drug overdose, 1 committed suicide by jumping to his death, hanging, right? So this judge was criticized for practicing medicine without a license. That's what the police, the enforcement have been doing in Maryland, in Montgomery County. That was what they, at least with respect to me, that was what they tried to do. That was what Judge James Bonifant was doing when he was declaring that I had bipolar disorder, when he's not a psychiatrist. He's not a psychiatrist. Even if he's a psychiatrist, under Maryland law, I choose the psychiatrist I go and see. I had never given consent or consulted with Judge Bonifant that I want him to be my psychiatrist. At no point in time, I hadn't given consent to anybody, not even the ones who did the evaluation. I hadn't given any consent. I have a right to give consent or withhold consent. Judge Bonifant was practicing, psychiatry without a license, but because Judge Lee Allen is a woman, they can jump on her back and abuse her and whatnot. Besides, Florida law allows judges to de facto act as psychiatrists, de facto, because that's when Florida law says that, well, if a judge thinks a defendant has a mental illness, then they can order them to the hospital for an evaluation and treatment. That's what Florida law, that's literally giving judges power, license to act like they're psychiatrists. So these people should address Florida's arbitrary laws, because they're laws used to target and abuse and violate the rights of minorities, especially black men and women. That's what the Florida law is. So instead of targeting and abusing the humanitarian and just Judge Lee Allen, these discontented people should go and have Florida's rules concerning competency evaluations and the power of judges in criminal cases altered, right? They should address those laws. And, but in any event, let me stop this here. I just wanted to conclude that discussion. In the meantime, I want to praise I looked up the bio of her profile of the profile of Judge Lee Allen, and the way they wrote of her as if she was just a novice. She's been a judge since 2018, so the practicing judge, sitting judge for about 8 years, so just about as long as Judge James Bonifant, who's chief judge of Montgomery County, right? And he won't be for long because I guess he's been retired as a judge on March 14, 2026, so in just a few weeks' time. Um, but in any event, Judge, Judge Lee Allen she went to a reputable law school, University of Florida Law School. She graduated in 2000. She had done her undergrad from that school, and she graduated with very high honors or something in business, and she got licensed, to practice law since 2001. So she's been practicing, uh, as an attorney and been a judge combined for 25 years. So she wasn't a novice. She's seen the harms, and the harms that she signaled regarding uh, the abuse, the use of antidepressants, was similar to the signaling by the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He warned of the dangers of using antidepressants, right? And of course, everybody, pharmaceuticals, all the people in that health industry, they go up in arms. This is consistent with what my friends, have friends who have PhDs in drug research. They're in the industry, but they're immigrants, they're American citizens, and they immediately cautioned me about the harms. And they told me that, look, the pharmaceuticals are destroying the lives of Americans. Americans are hooked, are dependent on drugs, and it's destroying their internal organs, and they're like automatons. And this is what, scientists told me, and medical doctors, psychiatrists. My aunt's a psychiatrist here in practices in Maryland, right? I have many friends who are psychiatrists, right? And of course, I ran a magazine, my own online magazine, and of course, part of what I used it for was investigative journalism. I never took a cent from anybody. I was running it out of pocket. These were things that I had, and the state of Maryland has robbed me of my businesses, my career. It's 3 years now, but God will give me justice. He will vindicate me, and I'm seeing it's part of the racism of the South, at least the racism of Montgomery County, Maryland, and some of its racist judges like Judge James Bonifant, right? Um, he no doubt is a corrupt judge, and it's up to law enforcement to investigate him, the appropriate authorities to investigate and prosecute him. And send the appropriate message that the American criminal justice system and the American Constitution, our legal system, is not up for sale. It's not for sale to the highest bidder, which is clearly what Judge James Bonifant does, and the racket he's involved in. It's not for sale. That our legal system has integrity, uphold the dignity of our criminal justice system and our Constitution. That Americans have constitutional rights, right? Unalienable constitutional rights. All of these things have been violated. Why? Due to racism and corruption. But anyway, let me, go back to the biography, impressive bio of Judge Lisa Allen. So she graduated from University of Florida's law school. I think it's called Levin School of Law. Um, Importantly, what I wanted to mention before I conclude about her law school, the law school she went to. So she had ample experience. She's somebody who has ample experience. What the alarm she raised, it wasn't arbitrary. It's something she is educated about, that she must have observed, because there are scientists that are warning about the dangers of using uh, antipsychotics, antidepressants. These things are actually signaled in the advertisement for them on television all the time. They tell you they may cause suicidal thoughts. They may cause the very symptoms that they're supposed to cure. Come on. Um, anyway, people are just being disingenuous and shady, with regard to the use of uh, antipsychotics and antidepressants. Because anytime there's money to be made, the harms that are caused, these executives, these corporations, they don't care, right? They don't care, and it's unfortunate that they've bought the criminal justice system, the legal system. They've bought the legal system. It's in they're in their pockets, right? But back to University of Florida School of Law, there was something that I remembered and I wanted to quickly mention. So one of my professors in law school, GW Law School, he taught me corporate taxation. That's Professor Neil Buchanan. And I realized he left my law school and moved to University of Florida's law school, where he's an emeritus professor. And what's interesting about him, though, is that he had uh, he had invited me for coffee when I just got into law school, and had a chat with me, and he told me about his experience, and I didn't get the job. The reason why he invited me for coffee was to be his research assistant. I didn't get a job with him, but I think he probably referred me to a professor whom I ended up being a research assistant to, who was a professor of criminal law, which was very interesting. He was a professor of criminal law, so I think he referred me to that guy. So I don't know who I really was interviewing for. So maybe he interviewed me and told this other professor that, okay, he's cool, you can hire him. I don't know if that's how it worked out. But I ended up being a research assistant to another professor, criminal law professor in law school. So Professor Buchanan, what was interesting about him is he has all these degrees, and I had to talk about him since he's connected to, sort of in some way, to Professor to Judge Lisa Allen. Since Lisa Allen graduated from the law school he transferred to, that's University of Florida Law School. Of course, they wouldn't have met since he moved to the law school after he taught me, right? So he probably moved around 2018 or so, 2017 or 2018. Um, Probably 2018. So Professor Lee Buchanan, right, has all these degrees, right? So he has five, which wouldn't seem impressive because that's about how many I have. But what's more impressive? It's far more impressive because he has three doctorates, right? He has a Juris Doctor. That's a Juris Doctor, Doctor of Law. So a Juris Doctor, by the way, it's a professional doctorate, not a research doctorate, right? So that's a distinction, right? So it's a professional doctorate, Juris Doctor degree from University of Michigan Law School. And prior to that, he had a PhD in economics from Harvard University. And then he has a third PhD, a third doctorate, which is his second PhD, third doctorate, from Monash University. He has a PhD in laws, right? So it's funny. He told me about when he went to law school, that he said he went to law school after he already had a PhD, after he'd already been a professor. So he said for him, when he was in law school, that he didn't go for the grades, because most people who go to law school, they're worried about their grades. But he went, since he was already a professor at Harvard, right? So his first degree was from Vassar College, right? Bachelor's. Then he got a master's from Harvard in economics, a PhD in economics from Harvard University as well, and was teaching economics. And then he decides to go to law school much later, and so he went to University of Michigan Law School, and he talked about his experience. That look, he wasn't, he was there to learn, and he was like not really paying attention to his classmates and things like that. And it was interesting that he was saying that, because I had just gone into law school, and it was like, because I too already had an MBA, I'd already had a career before law school, right? I'd had a career before law school, and I was much older, right? It turns out I wasn't the oldest person in my set, but I was quite old, right? So, and it was in law school that I started writing. I started writing for magazines. The Atlantic wanted to publish me, wanted me to write for them. But the thing is, I didn't want to be pigeonholed and be, since I was a student and I was writing for fun, right? I was writing for fun because I was just inspired. I'd just wake up, something would just motivate me, and I'd start writing. So I didn't want to like be forced to be writing, because when you're writing seriously, if they hire you, it's very different. But there was I actually got a contract with a couple of magazines, but they didn't force me, to write in a certain way. And well, back to the conversation with Professor Neil uh, Buchanan. So his conversation with me sort of, I think it motivated me not to be so fixated on grades and things like that. And, I should feel free to explore my interests while I was in law school. Of course, the typical 20-year-old who gets into law school, they've just come out of undergrad and they're still very fixated on, they haven't had a career. So law would be their first career. I had already had several careers, right? Of course, law was my dream, but I was now coming into law school with a different mindset. But interestingly, what I wanted to talk about, the reason I bring up Professor Neil Buchanan, apart from the conversation with him sort of motivated my, how my orientation in law school. Uh, but the fact that he has all these degrees also sort of is interesting to me about, hey, maybe that's something that I should consider doing, going to become a professor and just, academically, my older brother is a professor. And I think I always had that mindset since the time my mother told, when we were young, because he's the firstborn, he became a professor. And once he did that, I had another brother, and they're like, no, you can't you can't all be professors, because I had a second brother who wanted to do his PhD, and she stopped him. So that mindset was already in me. Then no, that's okay. My mom said, yeah, we have too many professors in our extended family. We can't just keep going. It would appear like it's a curse if we all just keep going toward that path, and we should diversify, right? So that was what my mom had suggested. So, but it's interesting. I saw that he's always globetrotting. He would go to Germany, Australia, different universities and teach. And I guess professors have fun with their lives. Because I guess that's how my brother has fun traveling all over the world as well. He's been a visiting professor in America. He's been lived in South Africa, Holland, Germany, different parts of the world. So he goes all over, and I guess they have an interesting and refreshing lifestyle, because I guess it keeps them young, right? Because you're constantly with young students um, who motivate your ideas. They give you new, fresher ideas, or you see how they're thinking. And it's interesting that me going back to school as well, with generations after me, I think I don't know if that's part of what I mean. You keep abreast of new things, right? You're not stuck in the way older people are set in their ways. Because when I talk with people that my peers and everything, sometimes when I'm talking to them, they seem so old, so ancient, right? And I guess constantly learning new stuff. I guess it just refreshes one. My name is Oluruti Osha, and right on Judge Lee Allen in from Hillsborough County, Tampa, Florida, and I will keep you posted. Thank you.